Police in Britain say they've been in contact with the government after 100 people were invited to drinks in the Downing Street Garden in May 2020. At that time, such gatherings were banned. The Serbian Prime Minister has told the BBC she remains hopeful that Novak Djokovic will be allowed to defend his singles title at the Australian Open. She said Belgrade was not looking for any special treatment for him. President Biden's gone to Atlanta in Georgia to make a key address expressing his support for voting rights reforms. The president says this would be a defining moment for democracy. And the World Health Organization says more than half of Europe's population could be infected with Omicron within 6 to 8 weeks. France has reported 368,000 new cases today. Italy has reported 220,000, double yesterday's number.
In the United States, doctors have transplanted a pig's heart into a man in an experimental operation in the state of Maryland. In Chicago, public school teachers approve a COVID-19 safety plan to permit the nation's third-largest school system to reopen after a week-long closure. In the Chinese city of Yuzhou, officials have ordered strong restrictions on movement after more reports of COVID-19. 3 other large cities in Henan province are under lockdown. And in Belgium, members of the European Union Parliament express sadness at the sudden death of former Parliament President David Sassoli.
We begin here in Japan, where the government has unveiled its latest set of anti-coronavirus measures as the Omicron variant continues to spread. The plan includes moving up the vaccine schedule to give people their third shots earlier.
We will be fully prepared and not overly afraid. We want to cooperate with all citizens to overcome this situation.
The government wants to first give booster shots to about 31 million people. These include doctors and nurses, care home residents and workers, as well as elderly citizens. It also plans to make boosters available to others earlier than planned after additional doses of the Moderna vaccine were secured. They'll be available to the general public starting in March. Officials say the self-defense forces will set up large-scale venues to help local municipalities with the rollout. Cases have been spiking in the southern prefecture of Okinawa. 503 medical personnel were unable to work as of Tuesday, so the prefecture asked the SDF to dispatch emergency medical assistance. 10 SDF nurses were sent to 2 hospitals in Okinawa for about a week starting Tuesday.
Our enemy is the Omicron variant. We will prevent our personnel from being infected. If that happens, we will not be able to carry out our duties.
The U.S. military says it confirmed more than 3,600 coronavirus cases on its installations in Japan as of Monday. More than 60% of them were in Okinawa. Officials here in Tokyo reported 962 new cases on Tuesday. That was the highest count among prefectures across Japan. The daily total was more than 6 times the figure for last Tuesday. A survey by the Tokyo Metropolitan Government shows the Omicron variant was suspected in about 80% of the cases. NHK's latest opinion poll suggests the approval rate for Prime Minister Kishida Fumio's cabinet is up on last month. Support for the cabinet stood at 57%, up 7 points from December. Disapproval stood at 20%, down 6 points. More than 1,200 people responded to the survey over the weekend. 7% said they evaluate the government's coronavirus response highly, and 58% expressed support to an extent. But nearly a quarter said they do not rate it much, and 7% said they don't rate the response whatsoever. Respondents were also asked if they think the government should expand the quasi-emergency antivirus measures in Okinawa, Yamaguchi, and Hiroshima prefectures to other areas. 58% said it's necessary, 29% said it's not. The Philippines continues to battle a sharp rise in coronavirus infections, with the recent daily tally higher than the numbers seen in the last peak in September. Health officials reported over 28,000 new cases on Tuesday. The daily figure had hit new highs for 3 straight days through Monday, when infections surpassed 30,000 for the first time. The officials say Omicron is now the dominant variant in the country. Their genome research revealed around 60% of samples from patients involved the new strain. The surge is being attributed to the fact many people went out or dined together for Christmas. The Metro Manila area has been hit especially hard. The government has raised the alert level there by 1 notch, banning meetings and limiting the number of patrons in restaurants and bars. Moving now to India, where authorities have started administering a third round of COVID-19 vaccines to healthcare workers, vulnerable people over 60, and those suffering from other health problems. People waited in line for their jabs on Monday, 9 months after their second shots. The Prime Minister is calling the booster a precautionary dose. Those eligible are receiving the same vaccines they got for the first two. India reported more than 168,000 new cases on Tuesday. Many were in large cities such as New Delhi and Mumbai, where the Omicron variant has overtaken Delta. We now go to North Korea's second missile launch in less than a week. Pyongyang appears to have once again fired a ballistic missile. Japan's prime minister reiterated his nation must always be ready.
It is extremely regrettable that North Korea repeatedly launches missiles. The Japanese government is stepping up its vigilance and surveillance.
Japan's defense ministry says the North fired at least one projectile eastward at about 7:25 a.m. on Tuesday. It was likely a ballistic missile. The ministry mapped an expected trajectory, suggesting a flight of less than 700 kilometers. That would mean it fell into the Sea of Japan outside the exclusive economic zone. Seoul has compared this and last week's test. North Korea called the earlier missile hypersonic, a term for weapons that exceed 5 times the speed of sound. South Korean defense officials say it did meet that definition, but only for a portion of the flight. The latest missile apparently performed better, flying further and traveling twice as fast. Now, the firing came just hours after 5 members of the United Nations Security Council joined with Japan to issue a statement condemning the North.
The DPRK's January 5th ballistic missile launch is a clear violation of multiple Security Council resolutions. The DPRK's continued pursuit of weapons of mass destruction and ballistic missile programs is a threat to international peace and security.
The 6 nations urged Pyongyang to return to dialogue, but a meeting of the full council ended without finding a consensus. This expert says Pyongyang will not back down on its military advancements, but he says there is a line the North will not cross.
North Korea wants to maintain the possibility of U.S. negotiations, so I don't think Pyongyang will conduct tests of nuclear weapons or intercontinental ballistic missiles, since it agreed to that with former U.S. President Donald Trump. I think the North will try to improve its military technology in other fields.
Hiraiwa says if the international community wants to curb that military growth, it must work with the nations closest to the North, China and Russia. NHK has learned U.S. embassy officials here in Japan are preparing to visit sites where North Korea abducted 3 Japanese citizens decades ago. The visit is planned for next week. The officials are expected to view the route in Niigata City, where Yokota Megumi went missing 45 years ago as she walked home from school. They may also visit the coast in Kashiwazaki City, where Pyongyang abducted Hasuike Kaoru and his then-girlfriend and now wife, Yukiko, 44 years ago. It would mark what's believed to be the first time for U.S. embassy officials to visit the site of the Hasuike's abduction. The mayors of Kashiwazaki City and Sado City sent a message through the embassy asking President Joe Biden for help. Sado City is where Soga Hitomi and her mother Miyoshi were abducted. The heads of all municipalities in Niigata Prefecture also set up a group to call for the resolution of the issue. This year marks the 20th anniversary of a Japan-North Korea summit that led to the return of 5 Japanese nationals. But no progress has been made since then. The Japanese government is under pressure to secure the release of the other abductees. Kazakh President Kassym-Jomart Tokayev says a Russia-led military alliance will be leaving his country in the coming days after helping to end a period of widespread unrest. The Kazakh government sought assistance from the Collective Security Treaty Organization last week after protests over rising fuel prices spread nationwide. The bloc, comprising 6 former Soviet states, sent about 2,000 troops to guard key facilities in Kazakhstan. The U.S. government questioned the legitimacy of the move. President Tokayev says the troops will start withdrawing on Thursday and complete their pullout within 10 days. Now, Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi expressed Beijing's support for the deployment in a phone conversation with his Russian counterpart. Wang told Sergei Lavrov China and Russia are friendly neighbors of Central Asian countries. He said they should not allow chaos or war in the region. Kazakhstan borders China's Xinjiang region. Western nations accuse Beijing of cracking down on the region's Uyghur Muslim minorities. Wang said their countries should oppose foreign interference in Central Asian affairs. Next, a medical first. Doctors in the United States say they've transplanted a genetically modified pig heart into a man. Researchers altered 10 genes in the heart to reduce the risk the patient's body would reject it. And the team behind the life-saving procedure says so far, so good.
He's awake. He is recovering and speaking to his caregivers, and we hope that the recovery that he is having now will continue.
Doctors say the 57-year-old man had end-stage heart disease and no options left. The U.S. Food and Drug Administration authorized the experimental medical technique for compassionate use. If animal-to-human procedures prove safe and effective, researchers say they could help deal with a donor organ shortage. Moving now to the weather, a series of recent downpours have caused significant floods over the U.S. Pacific Northwest. Our meteorologist Jonathan O has more on the situation in our World Weather Report.
Hello, we are once again talking about some heavy rain that has been moving through portions of Washington State and the Pacific Northwest. You can see these blue colors showing the batches of rain rolling through. Here's a look at the video to give you an idea of the situation on the ground. Several days of heavy rains have caused damage to houses in Washington State. According to the National Weather Service, floods across much of the southwestern portion of the state was the worst in over a decade. Members of the National Guard evacuated some residents and filled sandbags to protect properties. More heavy rain is in the forecast into Wednesday, with more risks of floods and landslides. Yes, we do have that low pressure system that will be coming in from the Pacific and moving its way toward the east, and so more flooding will be of concern, and we can see that in the 24-hour forecast, more of that moisture rolling through, possibly snow, into the upper elevations. On the flip side, we're talking about some really freezing weather, cold air really coming through the eastern side of the United States with snow into the eastern portions of Canada. Toronto looking at some snow on Wednesday with a high of 4, staying below freezing in Winnipeg, more rain from Vancouver into Seattle as we go through the middle of this week. Across Asia, really the active location on the eastern side of Asia is across Japan. Snow toward the northern areas with a low pushing through. We had some rain that impacted even Tokyo, and it was a chilly rain outdoors. Back toward the west, high pressure is really controlling the pattern. We're talking about dry conditions as we go forward through the day on Wednesday from Shanghai into places like Chongqing, but still looking at plenty of snow from the Hokuriku to Tohoku regions and even up into Hokkaido as we go into Wednesday. Tokyo slightly warmer, a little bit more in terms of sunshine, a high of 9. And notice we're looking at dry weather toward the west. Taipei is the exception here, a little bit of shower activity with a high of 16 on Wednesday. That's a look at your forecast. Hope you have a good day wherever you are.